The Encounter, the twin sons of Verelion, were slowly dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the bustling market streets. It was a place of endless noise and color, crowded with beings from 100 different worlds. Each stall was decorated with floating lights and flickering holograms. Vendors shouted in strange tongues, offering goods that sparkled, hummed, or smelled like nothing found on Earth. Alex moved carefully through the crowd. His boots pressed against the metallic streets that vibrated faintly under the weight of hovercraft gliding overhead. He wore his standard Earth Supply Corps jacket, its dull gray color making him stand out among the vibrant alien garments around him. He wasn't here for sightseeing. He had been assigned to deliver medical equipment to an outpost on the edge of the system, and this market was his last stop before departure. He kept his gaze straight, ignoring the curious stares and occasional whispers of aliens who rarely saw a human in their district. It wasn't hostility, but a mixture of surprise and distance. Humans were still newcomers to this part of the galaxy, their reputation uncertain. Then, cutting through the market noise, came a voice. It was soft but desperate, trembling like the sound of someone fighting tears. "Human. Take my toys, please." Alex stopped. His instincts made him turn toward the sound. Just a few steps away, in front of a dimly lit stall that had been abandoned, stood a little alien girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Her skin shimmered faintly green under the fading sunlight, and her amber eyes seemed far too large for her small face. She was holding a bundle of wooden toys, hand-carved spaceships, star-shaped ornaments, and a small mechanical bird whose wing was broken. Her clothes were torn and dusty. Her feet were bare. She looked weak, but it wasn't the appearance that froze Alex. It was her eyes. They were filled with fear, exhaustion, and a desperate kind of hope. "Please, take them," she whispered again, extending the toys toward him with trembling hands. "I just need medicine for my mother." The people walking past didn't stop. Some glanced briefly, others simply ignored her. A group of alien youths laughed as they passed, tossing a small piece of junk at her feet. She flinched but didn't run. She stayed standing, clutching the toys tighter as if they were her last lifeline. Alex slowly approached, lowering himself to her level. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl hesitated. Her voice was quiet. "Leora." "Leora," he repeated. "Where is your family?" She bit her lip, trying to keep herself from crying. Her voice cracked. "My father died in the mines last season. My mother is sick. She can't breathe well anymore. The clinic said she needs special medicine. But we don't have credits." Alex felt something twist inside his chest. He had seen poverty before, but this was different. This was raw and personal. He looked at the toys in her hands. They weren't worth much, but they were clearly made with care. Probably carved by her father before he died. "For how long have you been here?" he asked, glancing around. 2 days, she said. "I sleep behind that wall at night. I try to sell them during the day. Nobody buys. Some throw things at me. Some say I'm lying." Her voice broke on the last word, and she wiped her eyes quickly, not wanting to seem weak. Alex checked his wrist scanner. He had some extra credits, enough to buy food for a week, but nowhere near enough to afford alien medicine, especially in a district like this, where the trade guild controlled prices like warlords. But walking away wasn't something he could do. Not after seeing her face. He took one of the toys gently from her hand, a small star made of polished wood. The edges were smooth. The center was carved with strange alien letters. "Your father made these?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "Before he died, he said, 'The stars protect us.' He said one day someone kind will help." Alex's throat felt tight. He hadn't expected his supply run to end with a child begging him for help. He looked around again, noticing how the nearby merchants deliberately avoided eye contact, as if afraid of being pulled into her struggle. "Where is your mother now?" he asked firmly. "In the slums. East District," she whispered. "She can't walk anymore. I have to go back before the moon's rise. It's not safe at night." The market lights flickered as darkness began to settle. The crowd grew thinner. A cold wind blew through the streets, carrying the smell of burnt metal and stale air. Alex realized that if he let her go now, he might never see her again. and her mother would probably not survive another night. He knelt down a little closer and looked her in the eyes. "Leora, take me to your mother." Her eyes widened in shock. "Really?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Show me where she is." For a moment, she didn't move, as if afraid this was some cruel trick. But when she saw the calm determination in his face, her shoulders relaxed slightly. She held the toys tightly against her chest and nodded. They began to walk together through the narrowing streets, leaving the bright market lights behind. The further they went, the quieter it became. Buildings turned from shining towers to cracked walls and rusted pipes. The lights became dimmer, the air heavier. Every corner they turned revealed more signs of neglect: collapsed roofs, broken walkways, and abandoned stalls. Alex followed silently, his mind racing. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He wasn't here to change a society. But something deep inside told him this was more than a single act of kindness. This was the beginning of something bigger. As they approached the edge of the slums, the last glow of the suns disappeared. A pale blue moon rose in the distance, casting eerie light over the broken district. Leora stopped in front of a narrow alley and pointed. "She's inside," she whispered. Alex took a deep breath and stepped forward, unaware that this single decision, to follow a desperate alien child, would set off a chain of events that would shake the entire guild system and ignite a fire that no one could stop. A desperate plea. Alex followed Leora deeper into the eastern slums. The air grew colder and heavier. The vibrant energy of the market felt like a distant memory now. The streets here were narrow and twisted, built without planning, lined with old pipes that hissed and leaked faint steam. Broken lamps flickered weakly, casting ghostly shadows on walls covered in peeling paint and alien symbols. Somewhere far away, a loud metallic crash echoed through the night, followed by hurried footsteps disappearing into the darkness. The entire place smelled of damp metal, burnt oil, and sickness. It was the kind of place people avoided if they had any choice. But for Leora and others like her, this was home. She walked quickly, clutching her bundle of toys tightly against her chest, as if afraid they might be taken from her at any moment. Alex kept his steps steady behind her, scanning the surroundings carefully. He could feel the weight of watchful eyes from dark doorways and narrow alleys. People here didn't trust strangers, especially humans. Some whispered to each other when they saw him, others shut their doors silently. The deeper they went, the more Alex realized how forgotten this place was. No government patrols, no medical stations, no public lights, just a maze of desperation and survival. Finally, they reached a crumbling building at the end of a quiet alley. The structure looked more like an abandoned storage unit than a home. The door was a single rusted metal sheet hanging loosely from its hinges. Leora gently pushed it open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, a single lantern flickered weakly, casting long shadows over the cracked floor. A thin mattress lay against the wall, and on it rested a woman who looked far too fragile for her age. Her skin was pale with a faint bluish tint, her chest rising and falling in shallow. Rattling breaths, Leora rushed to her mother's side, placing the toys beside her like sacred treasures. She knelt down and held her mother's hand tightly, whispering softly in her native language. Alex stepped inside slowly, his boots creaking against the floor. The smell of sickness and stale air filled the room. He had seen patients in bad condition before, but this woman's state was critical. Her breathing was uneven, and a faint mechanical wheeze came from a small device on the floor, a broken air purifier that barely worked anymore. "This is my mother," Leora said softly, looking up at Alex with eyes that carried both fear and hope. "She's getting worse every day. The clinic refused to help because we are not citizens. They said we need guild credits to buy the medicine, but we have nothing left." Alex knelt down beside the mattress, pulling out his portable medical scanner. The soft hum of the device filled the silence as it swept over the woman's chest and lungs. Within seconds, the holographic display showed the results. Advanced respiratory infection, spreading rapidly without proper treatment. She might not last more than a day or two. He looked at Leora carefully. How long has she been sick like this? 2 weeks, Leora whispered, tears forming in her eyes. I tried everything. I went to every shop, every clinic. I begged. I even tried to clean dishes for merchants to earn something. But they told me to go away. Some laughed at me. Some called me a liar. Her small hands trembled as she spoke. My father's tools were taken by debt collectors after he died in the mines. They left us with nothing. I only had these toys. She gestured toward the small wooden carvings. They were all I had to sell, I thought. Maybe someone kind would buy them. Maybe someone would help us. Alex's heart tightened as he listened. He remembered the faces of children he had seen on war-torn colonies, standing in the ruins with nothing but broken toys, hoping for someone to care. He wasn't supposed to intervene in local matters. His mission was simple: deliver supplies and leave, but his human conscience refused to accept walking away. He looked again at the scanner's display and then at the broken purifier. He didn't have the medicine she needed in his kit, and the alien pharmacies would never sell it to him at a fair price. Not in this district controlled by the Trade Guild. He asked carefully, "How much does the medicine cost?" Leora lowered her eyes. 500 guild credits for 1 vial, she said slowly. That's enough for 1 treatment. They said she might need more. But even 1 vial could help her breathe again. Alex exhaled slowly. That was more than triple his monthly hazard pay, and guild credits weren't something he could just transfer from Earth currency. The guild had its own economic system designed to keep outsiders dependent. He thought about his ship, his supplies, his mission, and then he looked back at the frail woman and the little girl clutching toys like they were gold. A deep silence filled the room as the weight of reality settled in. Alex understood now that this wasn't just a case of poverty. It was systematic cruelty. The guild's policies made sure that those without status were slowly pushed to the edge until they vanished, and no one cared. But Alex cared. Something inside him shifted. He had faced enemies in combat, but this was different. This was a quiet, merciless system that crushed lives without firing a shot. He looked at Leora and saw not just a child, but the spark of a story that could not be ignored. He placed his scanner back into his bag and looked her in the eyes. "Leora," he said gently but firmly, "I can't promise anything yet, but I will help." Her breath caught. Her eyes widened as if she didn't fully believe him. You will?" "Yes," he said, nodding slowly. "I'll find a way." Outside, the wind howled through the alleyways, carrying the distant sound of Guild Patrol drones. Alex stood up and looked around the dim room one more time. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Guild didn't care about kindness, and defying them meant stepping into dangerous territory. But for some reason, he didn't feel fear. He felt purpose. In that moment, Alex made an unspoken promise, not just to Leora and her mother, but to himself. He wouldn't turn his back, not this time. The human's choice. The night on Varelian was colder than Alex had expected. A thin layer of mist settled over the slums, swirling through the narrow alleys like a living thing. The pale blue moon hung above the broken rooftops, casting a soft glow over the forgotten district. Inside the small, dimly lit shelter, Alex sat quietly on a cracked wooden stool while Leora slept curled up beside her mother, clutching one of her wooden toys to her chest like a shield against the world. The sound of the mother's shallow, rattling breaths filled the room, mingling with the faint hum of the malfunctioning purifier. It wasn't the noise that kept Alex awake. It was the weight of the decision forming in his mind. He stared at the scanner's holographic display one more time, replaying the diagnostic results. Every number and line told the same truth. Without the medicine, she wouldn't make it. Her body was losing the battle hour by hour. His military training taught him to analyze problems logically, to make decisions based on strategy and resources, not emotions. But this situation wasn't on any mission chart. It wasn't about logistics or orders. It was about a mother and a child abandoned by a system that valued profit more than life. He knew the Guild's reputation. They controlled the trade routes, the pharmacies, and even the hospitals. If he tried to buy the medicine officially, they would demand a price he could never pay, and if he tried to bypass their rules, there would be consequences. He leaned back against the cold wall. Closing his eyes for a moment, he thought about Earth, about the training speeches that described humans as resilient explorers who would bring light to forgotten corners of the galaxy. He wondered what those same trainers would say if they saw him now, sitting in a leaking shelter beside two alien lives no one cared about. He wasn't a hero. He was just a supply officer who delivered crates and checked manifests. But something about this girl, about the way she stood in the market, clutching her toys, had broken through his armor of routine. He couldn't shake the memory of her trembling voice saying, "I just need medicine for my mother." As dawn approached, faint light seeped through the cracks in the walls. Turning the mist outside into a glowing haze, Alex stood up quietly, careful not to wake them, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting his lungs. He walked a few steps away and pulled out his communicator. Contacting his ship, a small holographic projection appeared. It was Juno. His co-pilot and friend, still half asleep, her short black hair stuck out in every direction, and she rubbed her eyes before speaking. "Alex, it's not even cycle start yet. What's going on?" "I need information," he said firmly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Check our supply inventory for any respiratory medicine that matches the alien compound data I'm sending you." He uploaded the scan results from his device. Juno frowned as she examined the data. "This is guild-restricted stuff. We don't carry their proprietary medicines. You'd have to buy it locally." Alex's jaw tightened. "I figured," she raised an eyebrow. "Why? What are you planning?" He hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. "There's a woman here who won't survive without it, and a little girl who's trying to save her by selling wooden toys in the market." Juno was quiet for a moment, the seriousness in his voice pulling her fully awake. "Alex, this isn't part of the mission," she said carefully. "The Guild has rules, and if you cross them, they'll blacklist you from every port in this sector. We could lose clearance, supplies, everything." "I know," Alex said quietly. "But if I walk away, she dies." There was a long silence, only broken by the distant sound of a patrol drone whirring through the air. Juno finally sighed. "You always pick the impossible ones, don't you?" she muttered. Then her voice softened. "All right, I'll dig into the Guild's database and see where they store that medicine. But Alex, if they catch you, you'll be facing more than fines." "I understand," he said, cutting the connection. As he walked back toward the shelter, Alex's mind raced with possibilities. There were no easy paths ahead. Buying it legally was impossible. Begging was useless. And waiting meant watching a woman die in front of her child. He realized the only real option was to challenge the Guild's control. But doing that as a lone human in an alien district was almost suicidal. Still, he felt no hesitation. Something inside him had already made the choice long before his mind admitted it. He re-entered the shelter quietly. Leora was awake now, sitting beside her mother and stroking her hand gently. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, as if his presence alone meant hope. "Did you find the medicine?" she asked in a small, shaky voice. "Not yet," Alex said calmly, kneeling down beside her. "But I will." Leora stared at him for a moment, then slowly nodded. She didn't ask how. She didn't doubt him. Her trust was silent and absolute, and that silent faith made his decision feel heavier and more powerful than any order he'd ever received. As the first rays of sunlight cut through the mist, Alex tightened the straps of his jacket and looked out toward the horizon, where the Trade Guild's massive tower loomed in the distance like a dark spear against the sky. The streets below it bustled with commerce and greed, but somewhere inside those walls lay the medicine that could save a life. He clenched his fists, knowing what he was about to do would change everything. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't following orders. He was following his heart, and deep down, he understood something else. This wasn't just about one girl or one mother anymore. This was about standing against a system that believed kindness had no power. The corrupt guild, the Trade Guild Tower, rose from the heart of Varelian's commercial district like a jagged spear of black steel and glowing red lines that pulsed faintly like veins. It was both a symbol of power and a warning to anyone who dared to challenge their control. At its base, hundreds of merchants, transporters, and buyers moved like a living river, their voices blending into a constant low roar of bargaining, threats, and transactions. The closer Alex walked to the tower, the more he felt the weight of invisible eyes on him. Security drones hovered silently near the upper levels, while tall, armored enforcers stood near the entrance with heavy stun rifles slung across their chests. They were not soldiers of justice, they were guards of profit, and their expressions made that very clear. Alex approached the main gate wearing his Earth Supply Corps badge, knowing it was the only thing that would allow him to get through the first layer of security without immediate confrontation. A scanner passed over him with a cold blue light, analyzing his ID. For a tense second, he thought it might reject him, but the gate slid open with a mechanical hiss. He stepped inside, entering a massive circular hall filled with floating transaction platforms, digital boards flashing prices, and alien traders shouting their demands. It looked less like a place of governance and more like a temple devoted to greed. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where the guildmaster conducted business. He was a tall alien with silver markings running across his elongated head like serpents. His robes shimmered faintly as if they were woven from liquid metal. Around him were assistants tapping rapidly on holographic panels, recording deals and issuing commands. When Alex approached, two enforcers stepped in his path, their armor clicking as they shifted stance. "State your purpose." "Human," one of them growled in a deep mechanical voice. "I need to speak with the guildmaster regarding the purchase of restricted medical compounds," Alex replied steadily, keeping his posture calm but confident. The enforcer scanned him again, then turned toward the platform. After a brief exchange through their internal comms, they stepped aside. Alex climbed the steps to the platform, feeling dozens of alien eyes following his every move. Some were curious, others suspicious, but many were simply amused, as if watching a doomed performance. The guildmaster looked down at him with an almost theatrical smile. "A human supply officer visiting the guild tower," he said in a voice that was smooth and cold. "This is unusual. What brings one of your kind here?" Alex didn't waste time. "I need to purchase a vial of the respiratory compound, Nerath 5, the one your clinics use for advanced lung infections," he said, holding out a digital chip containing his credit data. "I have Earth credits and trade tokens to exchange." The guildmaster let out a low chuckle that echoed through the hall. "Earth credits," he repeated slowly, tasting the words like they were a joke. "Your currency has little value here, and Nerath 5 is not something we sell to outsiders. It is restricted to guild citizens and verified trade members. Surely you must know this." "I know," Alex said firmly, "but a woman is dying in the Eastern District. She needs that medicine to survive, and no clinic will treat her because she isn't a citizen. I'm willing to pay whatever is reasonable for a single vial," the assistants whispered among themselves, their expressions twisting between amusement and disbelief. The guildmaster's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it, only cruelty. "Human, do you think this is a charity house? Do you think your sentimental appeals hold weight here?" he said slowly. "If you wish to buy Nerath 5 as a non-citizen, the price is 5,000 guild credits, non-negotiable. Pay it or leave." Alex's stomach tightened. That price was beyond impossible. It wasn't meant to be paid. It was meant to humiliate him and make sure no outsider ever dared to ask again. He clenched his fists slightly but kept his voice controlled. "That price is exploitation, and you know it." The guildmaster tilted his head, his silver markings catching the light like a snake ready to strike. "Exploitation?" he echoed. "No, human. It is simply the value we place on life here. If the woman is not worth the price, perhaps she was never meant to live. The system decides who survives, not your misplaced human compassion." The room erupted in cold laughter from several merchants. Alex felt his pulse rise, not from fear but from anger. The casual cruelty in the guildmaster's words struck something deep within him. He had faced hostile enemies on the front lines, but this was something darker. This was power wrapped in civility. Choking lives silently, he leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm. "You're hoarding medicine meant to save lives. That's not trade, that's control. And one day, someone will challenge that. The guildmaster's eyes narrowed, the smile fading from his face. Careful, human, he hissed softly. You are far from home, and your badge means little here. You should learn when to bow, not bark. Alex straightened up slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I didn't come here to bow, he said, turning away as he walked down the steps. The enforcers watched him like predators, ready to pounce at any misstep. He passed through the bustling hall once again, but this time he wasn't just observing the greed. He was feeling it press against him from every direction, like a suffocating fog. By the time he exited the tower, the sky above had turned a dull orange as the suns climbed higher, bathing the city in harsh light. Alex walked through the streets with a fire burning quietly inside him. He knew now that kindness alone would not move the guild. They would not lower their price. They would not offer mercy, and they would not be reasoned with. He realized that if he wanted to save Leora's mother, he would have to go against their system entirely. He would have to take risks that could cost him everything. The tower loomed behind him like a dark giant, but Alex didn't look back. His decision was already forming in his heart, and it was one that would change not just the fate of one family, but perhaps the balance of power in this city itself. The plan unfolds. The suns were high over Verelion by the time Alex returned to the shipyard, their harsh light bouncing off the metal rooftops like fire. His mind was burning with the guildmaster's words. Every step he took echoed with frustration and clarity. He had gone to the guild tower as a man asking for help, but now he was returning as a man who had made a silent declaration of war. Juno met him near the loading ramp, her arms crossed and her face tense. She could tell from his expression that the conversation inside the tower had not gone well. Without a word, he handed her the recording chip from his wrist unit. She inserted it into the ship's console, and the hologram of the guildmaster's arrogant face filled the air, his mocking words replaying clearly. When the recording ended, Juno let out a low whistle. They really don't even try to hide their greed, she muttered, shaking her head. 5,000 guild credits for one vial. That's more than the entire medical budget of a small colony. Alex leaned against the control panel, his eyes fixed on the distant skyline where the tower stood like a dark needle against the sky. They don't care about life, he said quietly. They care about control. And they've been doing this for so long that no one even questions it anymore. Juno studied him carefully. I know that look, she said slowly. You're planning something. He didn't deny it. The medicine they're selling isn't even theirs, he said, pulling up the cargo manifest on the console. 6 months ago, Earth donated medical crates to Verelion as part of a humanitarian program. The guild took those crates, slapped their labels on them, and now they're selling them at criminal prices. That Nerath 5 compound was meant for the poor. For people like Leora's mother. Juno frowned, scrolling through the data. You're saying it's still in their storage warehouses? Yes, Alex replied firmly. Section 12, near the west docks, it's heavily guarded, but they move shipments at night through maintenance tunnels beneath the facility. I saw it on the blueprints during my mission briefings. They never expected someone like me to use that knowledge against them. Juno sighed and rubbed her forehead. Alex, this is madness. If they catch you, they'll throw you in a guild cell, and you know they don't exactly follow the same rules of justice as Earth. He met her eyes steadily. I know the risks, but if I don't do something, she dies tonight. For a moment, the control room was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Juno looked away, exhaling slowly. She had known Alex for years. They had flown through asteroid storms, supply blockades, and near-miss evacuations. She knew that when he made up his mind, there was no pulling him back. Finally, she said, You'll need help. He shook his head. No, I can't involve anyone officially. If this goes wrong, it needs to fall on me alone. Juno smirked faintly. You're stubborn, but you're not stupid, she said, pulling out a small toolkit from the shelf. And you're not going alone. I'll stay here and jam their security frequencies from the ship. It'll give you a small window, maybe 3 minutes. Before they notice, Alex allowed himself a brief smile of gratitude. 3 minutes is all I'll need, he said. That night, the western docks were a different world compared to the bright market. The air was colder, the streets quieter, and the distant sound of loading cranes echoed like giants groaning in their sleep. The guild's warehouses stood in neat rows, tall and featureless, with automated drones floating between them like silent sentinels. Alex moved through the shadows wearing a dark field jacket. His badge tucked away, his every movement was calculated. He had memorized the security patrol patterns, the location of every camera, and the rhythm of the guard rotations. He reached a rusted drainage grate behind Warehouse 12, exactly where the maintenance tunnel began. Using a portable cutting tool, he silently removed the grate and slipped inside. The tunnel was narrow, damp, and filled with the hum of old machinery, but it led directly beneath the storage wing. His heart pounded steadily, not with fear, but with focus. Years of field training had taught him to think clearly under pressure, and now every lesson mattered. Above, Juno's voice came through his earpiece in a whisper. "You've got 3 minutes before the network notices my interference. Make it count." Alex reached the access hatch and used a stolen maintenance card he had picked up earlier from a distracted dock worker. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing rows upon rows of stacked crates glowing faintly under the emergency lights. Each crate bore Earth's humanitarian seal, white and blue with a symbol of a helping hand, crudely scratched out and replaced with the guild's logo. The sight filled him with a quiet fury. This wasn't just theft. It was a betrayal of trust on a galactic scale. He found the medical crates and quickly scanned their contents, locating the Narath 5 vials. Neatly packed and untouched, he grabbed one, then another, realizing that taking only one might not make a difference when so many people were suffering. His original plan had been simple: steal a single vial and escape, but standing there, surrounded by stolen hope, that plan suddenly felt too small. His earpiece crackled. "Alex, you're down to 90 seconds, Juno warned. He opened a nearby locker and found a small hover cart, loading several vials into it before sealing the crate back to avoid suspicion. He knew that delivering just one to Leora's mother would save her life, but exposing the guild's theft could save hundreds, maybe thousands. Alarms hadn't sounded yet, but he knew time was running short. He pushed the hover cart toward the hatch, adrenaline surging through his veins. He was no longer just a supply officer. He was a man carrying stolen medicine through the shadows, defying a system that thought no one would ever dare to fight back. The turning point, Alex pushed the hover cart through the narrow maintenance tunnel, his breath controlled but heavy. Every sound seemed louder in the confined space: the soft whir of the cart's engine, the echo of his boots on the wet floor, the distant thrum of security drones above. His mind was sharp, focused on every second. Juno's voice crackled in his ear, low but tense. "Alex, they've started scanning the outer network. I can delay their detection a little longer, but once the alarms trigger, the west docks will go into full lockdown." He reached the drainage exit and carefully maneuvered the cart up through the grate, sealing it behind him as silently as he could. The night air hit his face, cool and sharp, carrying with it the faint hum of distant engines and the far-off buzz of street markets winding down. He wasn't safe yet. He was in guild territory, and the moment they realized someone had breached their warehouse, every exit would be crawling with enforcers. He guided the cart along the shadowed edges of the alleyways, staying close to broken walls and abandoned machinery. His years of field operations were paying off. He moved with precision, never lingering, never drawing attention. But despite his discipline, his heart pounded like a drum as he approached the last turn leading to the open street. Once he crossed that, he'd be in the slums, where the guild's presence was weaker, but the danger wasn't gone. Then, a sharp voice cut through the darkness. "Stop right there." 3 guild enforcers emerged from behind a stack of cargo crates, their armor gleaming under the pale moonlight. Their rifles were raised, their red targeting lights locking onto his chest. Alex froze for a split second, his mind racing through options. He couldn't fight them head-on. They were armored and trained, but running blindly would only make him a target. The lead enforcer, taller than the others and marked with silver stripes on his helmet, stepped forward. You're far from your ship. Human, he said, his voice filtered through a metallic speaker. And you're pushing guild property? Care to explain? Alex kept his tone steady. I'm transporting authorized medical cargo, he said, though both he and the enforcer knew that was a lie. The enforcer let out a low, mocking laugh. Medical cargo that was in a sealed warehouse? Do you take us for fools? He lifted his hand slightly, and the two enforcers behind him adjusted their aim. Step away from the cart. Alex slowly raised his hands, stepping slightly to the side, not to surrender, but to reposition himself. His eyes scanned the environment quickly. Not far behind the enforcers was a row of power couplings running along the wall. Partially exposed and leaking faint sparks, his mind calculated distances, timing, and angles in seconds. Juno's voice whispered urgently in his ear. They're closing the outer docks, Alex. You've got less than a minute before the gates lock. You need to move. Without warning. Alex slammed his foot on the cart's manual override, sending it surging forward toward the enforcers. At the same moment, he threw a small EMP charge he had taken from the ship's toolkit toward the exposed power couplings. The charge detonated with a sharp pop, sending a burst of blue electricity cascading across the wall. The lights flickered violently, and the enforcers staggered as their visors scrambled with static. Alex didn't wait. He sprinted past them, his boots pounding against the metal ground. He grabbed the hover cart handles mid-run, pulling it through the alley with every ounce of strength he had. Behind him, the enforcers shouted, regaining their footing. Energy bolts sizzled through the night, striking walls and sending chunks of debris flying. One shot grazed his shoulder, burning through his jacket and sending a jolt of pain down his arm. But he didn't slow down. The alley opened into a wide service road that led straight toward the slums. Alex could see the faint flicker of the district lights in the distance. The sound of sirens began to rise behind him. The guild had activated the alarms. A row of drones swooped down from above, their red searchlights cutting through the darkness, scanning every movement. Juno's voice came again, strained but focused. I'm scrambling the drone signals, but I can't hold it for long. Get out of their sector now. Alex turned sharply into a narrow side passage, the cart scraping against the walls as he forced it through. The drones zipped overhead, missing him by seconds. He could hear the heavy footsteps of enforcers echoing from behind, their armor clanging like relentless machines. But Alex didn't look back. He kept his eyes fixed on the glowing edges of the slum district ahead, knowing that once he crossed into that chaotic maze, their formations would break. Finally, with one last burst of speed, he crossed under the broken gate that marked the unofficial border between guild-controlled territory and the slums. The sirens grew distant, the searchlights scattered, and the shadows of the narrow alleys embraced him like a cloak. He slowed his pace slightly, guiding the hover cart through twisting streets until he reached a small hidden access point that led to his ship's underground supply corridor. Juno was waiting at the entrance, her face pale but determined. You're bleeding, she said, noticing his shoulder. It's just a burn, he replied, pushing the cart inside. We got it. She quickly sealed the doors behind them as the sound of distant sirens continued to echo faintly through the night. For a long moment they both stood there in the dim light of the corridor, breathing heavily, surrounded by crates of stolen medicine. The reality of what they had done settled in slowly. This wasn't a small act of kindness anymore. It was an open defiance of one of the most powerful organizations on the planet. Juno looked at him seriously. You know there's no going back after this? Alex nodded slowly. I know, he said, his voice firm. But I also know why we did it. A new dawn. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, turning the metallic rooftops of the slums a soft golden color that contrasted with the harsh reality below. Inside the small shelter where it all began, the air was thick with tension and quiet hope. Alex stood by the old purifier, setting up a makeshift medical station with the stolen vials of Nerath 5 arranged neatly beside him. Juno had worked through the night preparing dosage packs, using her medical training to calibrate everything precisely. Leora sat beside her mother, holding her hand tightly, her wide amber eyes fixed on Alex's every movement as if he were performing some kind of miracle. The woman's breathing was faint, Weaker than the day before, her skin had turned pale blue, and every breath she took was shallow and painful. Time was slipping away, and everyone in the room could feel it. Alex knelt beside her, gently lifting her frail arm and inserting the injection unit. The vial clicked into place, and a soft hum filled the silence as the medicine entered her bloodstream. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then her chest began to rise a little more steadily, the rattling sound fading slowly with each breath. Leora's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as she whispered, "It's working. It's really working." Her voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and joy. Alex exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. But he knew this was just the beginning. One life was being saved. But the guild wouldn't stay silent for long. News travels fast in the slums. Especially when hope is involved. By mid-morning, whispers spread through the narrow streets like fire through dry grass. People spoke in hushed tones about a human who had defied the guild, who had stolen their medicine and brought it to those who were left to die. One by one, families began arriving at the shelter. Alien men, women, and children suffering from the same infection that had taken hold of Leora's mother. Their faces were tired, but their eyes burned with a faint spark they hadn't carried in years. Alex stepped outside and saw the growing crowd forming near the alley. Some came walking slowly, others leaning on family members, some carrying children in their arms. All of them had the same desperate question in their eyes. Is it true? Can we be helped? He didn't answer with speeches or promises. He simply nodded and began organizing them into lines. Setting up a distribution point with Juno's help, they worked tirelessly, administering doses and scanning patients. The crates they had taken from the warehouse were enough to treat dozens, maybe even hundreds, and with every injection, the slums seemed to breathe a little easier. But the guild noticed, and their reaction came swiftly. By noon, enforcer drones swarmed the edges of the slums, broadcasting warnings in their cold mechanical voices. "Return stolen property immediately," they repeated. "Unauthorized possession of guild medical compounds is punishable by imprisonment or execution." The message echoed through the streets. But something unexpected happened. The people didn't scatter. They didn't hide. Instead, they gathered together, standing shoulder to shoulder, a sea of determined faces staring up at the drones. Among them stood Leora, holding one of her wooden star toys high in the air like a symbol. Her voice, though small, rang clear when she shouted, "This medicine is ours. You left us to die." Others joined her, voices rising in unison. "This is our right. You won't take it back." The sound grew louder, echoing through the alleys and streets, until it reached the main district where traders and workers paused to listen. For years, the slums had been silent, but now they were roaring. Alex stepped forward, his jacket scorched from the night's escape, his face set with calm determination. He wasn't leading them with words. He was leading them with action. The guild had power, soldiers, and drones. But what they didn't have was unity. And in that moment, the people found theirs. The drones hesitated, their programming unable to handle the sudden, massive civilian resistance. It wasn't long before planetary authorities intervened. Drawn by the growing unrest, investigations were launched, and Juno's recordings of the Guildmaster's arrogance were transmitted to the Oversight Council, exposing their theft of humanitarian aid and their extortion practices. Under massive public pressure, the Guild's operations were forced into suspension, their warehouses seized, and their leadership summoned to face charges they had believed they'd never answer for. In the days that followed, the slums changed. Medical supplies were distributed freely. Clinics reopened under neutral oversight, and for the first time in years, the sound of coughing and wheezing gave way to laughter and conversation. Alex became a quiet figure among the people, not a savior on a pedestal, but a human who had stood up when it mattered. Leora's mother recovered slowly, her strength returning with each passing day, and she never forgot the night a stranger defied an empire to save her. One evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, Leora found Alex near the same marketplace where they had first met. She ran up to him, clutching her wooden star, her eyes shining with gratitude and something deeper, a belief that kindness could change entire worlds. She held out the star to him and said softly, "You didn't buy my toys that day, but you gave me something far greater." Alex smiled gently and accepted the small carving, turning it over in his hands. The wood was smooth and warm, a simple object, yet now it carried the weight of everything that had happened. He looked down at her and said, "Keep making them, Leora. One day, they won't be toys anymore. They'll be symbols of what you and your people achieved." As night fell, the slums were no longer drowned in silence. They were alive with lights, voices, and hope. The guild's tower still stood tall in the distance, but its shadow no longer reached as far as it once did. The story of one alien girl and one human spread across the planet and beyond, whispered among traders, workers, and travelers. It became a tale not of rebellion for power, but of humanity's quiet, unbreakable spirit. And somewhere deep inside, Alex knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of something far greater than he had ever imagined.